I have a 7 and a 9-year-old, and they love the pool. Just this year, my 7-year-old Caleb got really comfortable going off the low diving board and swimming to the side on his own. He and his brother both took to the water pretty quickly once they got the hang of it, but the one thing they both have in common is their approach to the high dive. They'll climb up the steps all the way to the top, and then they'll slowly inch their way out towards the end of the diving board and stop and retreat a little ways and then walk precariously to the end again and stop again and repeat. And the bad thing is they get far enough out there that I don't want to startle them from below because they might fall off. And I start to get worried a stiff wind's going to blow them off the side down to the water or worse, the concrete. But everything in me wants to scream from down below, would you jump already? Like, it drives me nuts. And I feel that way with Esther. I mean, one dinner, fine. Then another dinner. And I just want to scream at Esther, would you just jump already? Would you just ask the king and get it over with? Yet Esther is patient. She knows what she's doing, and God has a plan. But if I'm being honest, patience is never one of those things I've had an abundance of. And maybe some of you can relate. If I'm being completely honest, sometimes I've wanted to yell something similar to Jesus. Would you just show up already? Would you just return already? Would you just heal them already? Would you just provide already? Would you just jump already, Jesus? Now, I trust that God's writing a better story than I could, but I just sometimes wish he'd get to the end a little faster. I wish he wouldn't wait till what seems like the last second to come through with the rescue. And maybe you can relate. I kind of wonder if Mordecai felt the same way. I mean, he's the one that knows if Esther doesn't come through, his earthly story is over. Yet Esther moves at the pace God has set, and she trusts. And in the end, even though it may seem like last second the rescue comes through, and I'm guessing there's some of you listening to this who have felt the pressure of waiting for God to come through with the rescue you were hoping, the rescue you were praying and waiting for. I'm willing to bet maybe some of you are going through that right now. I want you to think about what's really at stake here in the story of Esther. An entire nation of people, an entire people group are in danger of being wiped off the face of the earth. There has been an edict issued, and Haman is ready and willing to get this carried out as soon as possible. And the only real hope they have is in a hero, Esther, who doesn't really seem to be the hero type. Mordecai and his people are waiting on a long shot to come through and save them from certain death. You know, that's similar to another rescue story I like as well. A people who are in desperate need of rescue from certain death. A death sentence they can do absolutely nothing about. They place their hope in a hero who by all worldly accounts doesn't look very heroic. A last-ditch effort to get rescued. Hope in a long shot to come through and save them from certain death. Some of you figured this out, but that's our story. That's God's story of redemption for his people. We, you and me, we were hopelessly lost in sin. We have a death sentence given to all mankind that we can do nothing to get ourselves out of. We are completely unable to rescue ourselves and pay the penalty that needs paid to get us out of our sin debt and our death sentence. And our hero is a man named Jesus, who was born in a manger outside with the cattle. He isn't a hero looking type by all accounts. He's not the powerhouse, get out of my way, let's kick down the door and rescue the people kind of guy. When you need rescued most of the time we're looking for Rambo or the Expendables, and Scripture tells us that Jesus was neither. He was more Lambo, I know, that's terrible, and expendable in the eyes of most people. Yet he was like Esther, the only hope we have. And like Esther, Jesus was the exact person God had in mind to fulfill his story of rescue of his people. Jesus came into the story. He left heaven, came down to earth, God in the flesh. And he lived a perfect life, one without sin. And then he was captured and sentenced to die. Jesus went to the cross, and on the cross he took on our sin and paid the penalty of death that was needed to be paid so that we could be set free. Jesus rose from the dead and conquered death once and for all so that we could be rescued. That's the bigger story. That's the story. That's this story of Esther. It's what it's really pointing to. It's the story that has already been written for you. You just have to be willing to believe. Tonight, if you've never placed your faith in the only one who can rescue you from your sin, would you talk to someone in your group or someone at your meeting about that? This story of Jesus may seem pretty unlikely, and I mean the fact that someone would die for you and me seems a little out there, a little far-fetched, right? It's just not very likely. Good thing, though, that God writes unlikely stories all the time. I want to tell you tonight that no matter what you've done, no matter how far from God you've ran, no matter how enslaved to sin you've become, there is not a single person in the history of the world, you included, that is beyond the rescuing hand of Jesus. He came into earth's story just for you. Why don't you invite him in tonight?